This podcast is brought to you by Blackaby Ministries International. To find out more, visit blackaby.org.
Well, welcome to the Richard Blackaby Leadership Podcast. My name is Sam, and I'm your host, and it is my pleasure to be joined by Dr. Richard Blackaby.
Well, it's great to meet with you today, Sam.
It is. Oh, I see what you did there, Richard. Funny you should mention meetings.
Oh, did I?
You did. And I think we've talked about this before on the podcast, but, you know, meetings are perhaps the bane of your existence, or one would think that way if you ever hear Richard talk about meetings, and maybe not all meetings, but
meetings and people moving slowly off of airplane
and people who stand on the walk side of the moving sidewalk.
Yeah, okay, now you're getting us.
Okay, we're getting derailed.
My blood
here.
boiling there.
Yeah,
Sam,
sorry. We'll just take a deep breath here and refocus. But you know, meetings are perhaps the bane of many of our listeners' existence. I know that you and I are happy to avoid meetings if at all possible. You know, it's could this meeting be an email and then let's move on. But it's difficult sometimes to go to these meetings, or you know, we often see, you know, just these pointless meetings that come up. And I think especially since COVID, a lot of meetings were canceled to the great rejoicing of the masses, but then it all just moved to Zoom. And it seems like maybe Zoom meetings have now taken the place of the in-person meetings and so on and so forth. And they don't necessarily have to be horrible. And I think it's great if you can take the listeners through and myself through ways that we can maybe make the meeting more effective. For leaders, especially those who are planning or potentially planning a meeting.
Yeah, and I think it's just good to circle around some of these things here periodically. And you're right, we've kind of gone through a bit of a transformation from when they were all in person. And I've had a number of people say to me, you know, I used to have to fly to New York City about once a quarter to meet, and I realized, boy, if a Zoom call would sure save a lot of airfare and hotel and taxi expenses, and so meetings kind of, a lot of them went online, and in some ways maybe people met more often because it was a lot easier to Zoom than to fly somewhere. And but now again, people are starting to question all these meetings. You know, I remember when a lot of my travel started to disappear because of COVID, and I thought, wow, look at all this free time I have to write and think and work on different talks, and then the Zoom meetings just started filling up my calendar, and it was like, oh, I thought I was free from these.
It's just so easy, you know. It's just, well, why don't we just, you know, you don't have to come here. You can just get online on this video. I think it's a conspiracy of the extroverts who plan and
need to
manipulate
talk to people.
these things.
So let me just touch a couple things here about meeting. And there are some great books. I think I've mentioned before, like Patrick Lencioni has a great book on death by meeting, which I think is a great title. And he has several books where he addresses some of those issues, and he does a great job with that. A couple things to say. First of all, if you are in charge, you're the one calling a meeting, before you just throw that meeting out there, a couple of things you need to consider. One is, what is your goal? What is the purpose of the meeting? And of course, as a leader, you need to have a purpose behind everything you do. Don't do anything purposelessly. If you're going to have a meeting, what is your purpose? And honestly, for a lot of the meetings that we have, it is simply because it's a monthly or a weekly obligation. Well, we always meet the first Monday of the month, or the first Monday of every week, or whatever it is. And so it's that time again, so we're going to meet. Now, we may have nothing to discuss, nothing to work on, but that's what we do.
But we'll spend an hour here together.
Churches do that so often. You know, we have a deacons meeting every month, an elders meeting. Well, what are you going to be discussing? Well, we don't really, it's a pretty light agenda this month. Don't really have anything. We might just have a little more time just to shoot the breeze. And so if you're simply meeting to meet, cancel the meeting. Secondly,
I like that.
A lot of times people meet because they want to, we need to get people up to date. We need to inform them of, you know, what's been happening since we last met. And that's where your classic could this be in an email?
Yeah.
Could this be in an audio text? There's lots of ways to
get people
to let people know that's much more time efficient. Just give me some bullet points. Since we last communicated, here's what's happened. This much money's come in. This is what's been decided. This occurred, that occurred. We hired this person. You can look on one page and see a summary and then carry right on. Informing people is probably one of the worst reasons to meet, because if it's just a matter of transferring information from your head to other people's heads, that there's lots of more efficient ways to communicate that than getting everybody in the room and when you tell them all at the same time. And then third, sometimes people will say, well, I just think it's just important that we get together sometimes. And what they're really saying is we want to team build. We just feel like the team needs to all get together in the room. And there is some validity in that. But the problem is that meetings aren't always the best team builders. I mean, if your desire is to do team building, then you might want to meet on a ropes course, or you might want to go to an escape room or something. There's lots of things that you can do to build your team without simply going through a traditional kind of meeting where you're reading minutes and you're doing all the normal stuff that you do. So ask yourself, if really we're meeting because I really want to build this team and just keep us close, well, then let's think through what our agenda will be. Maybe it shouldn't be an ordinary meeting then. It needs to be focused on team building. Just simply having an ordinary, purposeless, meaningless meeting is not going to necessarily make all of your team feel closer. They're going to actually feel maybe they'll be united in being agitated, having all of their time wasted at the same time. Yeah. And then fourth is really, I think, the primary reason that you meet, and that is to address an issue. Is there an issue that we need to tackle? Is there a problem that we need to tackle? And we can best do that by coming together, pooling all of our perspectives and expertise and opinions, and then to actively engage in problem solving. And that is a good reason to meet if you lead your meeting well. And so if that's maybe what you want to do, we need to address a couple of issues that have cropped up in our organization. We want to stay lean and mean and efficient. Then the second thing you want to do is, if you know what your purpose is plan the agenda. Okay, so let's say we're going to meet for an hour. How do we maximize that hour of time? And you might begin by just deciding, well, what time of day is it most efficient to meet? I can tell you, if you wait till 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 3:30 to have an important meeting where you're brainstorming about possibilities, that's probably not wise. People are looking at their watch. They've got to go pick up kids from school. It's the end of the day. They're tired. They've been up. They didn't have a good night's sleep last night, and now they just are bleary-eyed, want to get home. Sometimes planning, but have it at 10 in the morning, 9:30 in the morning. They're fresh. They've gotten their coffee. They haven't really spent all their bullets yet. They've got lots to energy still to engage in a good meeting. Sometimes what part of the week you meet in can make a difference. Again, if it's Friday afternoon, and you're now going to tackle big issues, it's probably not the best time. You probably want to tackle some of those earlier in the week, where you've got energy and you're in kind of work mode, mindset. The week you still got several days to go, and so hey, let's go ahead and tackle this issue. But and then just how you begin the meeting can be important. Sometimes you might want to start with a devotional thought that just gets people pointing toward God, or you might just have a prayer time that's very focused and personal and relevant. I tell you, reading through minutes is probably the worst way to start a meeting. Don't start off a meeting by boring people. Make it interesting. Catch their interest level, peak it early. Minutes are something that you can email ahead of time to have these read before we get there. Let's not waste our hour reading something that I could have sent to you a week earlier. And then just plan for some interaction. If it's just going to be simply a monologue where you just simply do all the talking, you probably could put that in an email. The reason you're meeting around a table or in a room is because you want interaction. So think about the kind of questions you want to ask people. Think about the kind of feedback you want. And again, when you do meet, you can either look backwards, you can review, you can talk about what already happened. And sometimes, if you want to learn from that, you want to grow, you want to do things better the next time, that's fine. But most meetings ought to be more forward oriented. It ought to be more about what are we going to do? How do we prepare ourselves for what's still to come? It's what's been done. You might learn some things from that, but it's done. It's happened already. You can't change what's been done, but you can do the future better. And so I think most meetings ought to be more future oriented. I know a lot of meetings, and again, especially in church kind of meetings, where you spend a lot of time talking about the past, what was done before. And really, I think meetings and leadership in general ought to be much more future oriented.
Yeah, that catching people up to date and kind of stuff, that can all be emailed in advance, and should be emailed in advance.
Yeah,
so
anything that as you would say, anything that could be put in an email should be, and don't waste. Because if you're doing a meeting well, where you're engaging people, an hour will go by pretty fast.
Yeah,
and so. Don't waste that hour with stuff that could have been in an email.
Well, and I think the problem with that, when people, if they're going to just kind of bore you to tears with the minutes from the previous meeting, or going to just kind of go through some sort of procedural thing, and I feel like that also just derails the thing that you really should be meeting about. Like, so if you're going to then talk about future stuff or get some input, like, you've now bored and sort of irritated everybody, and you're not getting the best from people if that's at the end of some sort of laborious monologue.
And if you've chewed up half of your meeting time reading minutes, and maybe a prolonged prayer time where people just kind of prayed about every ailment that they were aware of, now you really only have 30 minutes, and now you're getting to the point where it's hard to really address an issue in any kind of significant depth, because you wasted so much time at the front end dealing with stuff that you didn't even have to have in the meeting. So, sometimes that, because you wasted time up front, now you don't really have the time left to really get to the meat of what you're meeting about in the first place. Third thing is just like focus on engaging the group. And again, another issue I think that's really important is, don't have people in the meeting that don't need to be there. I remember when I was the president of a seminary, and I had various subcommittees meeting about various things, and then I'd have people saying, "Well, Richard, we invited you. You don't really need you to be there. We just didn't want you to feel left out." I would say, nothing brings me more joy than not being invited to a meeting. So just
but maybe the only thing that could surpass that joy is having that meeting canceled.
Yeah, but so that no one had to waste their time. But so think about everyone sitting around that table. Do they need to be there? And because there's also, if people are there that don't even have anything really to do with the problem you're going to address, then they're taking up time, and you may feel like they may want to comment, but they don't really even know what's going on. They're not going to be a part of the solution. You're just taking a whole bunch of extra time away from getting the key people in a room that actually can really tackle the problem. So think about, keep the meeting as small as you can, so that the people who are in the room all have a vested interest. They've got skin in that game. And make sure people that are there know that you need them there, that they're there for a reason, that you're expecting a contribution from them. You want to hear from them. A fourth thing, when you're planning, is just simply start on time, end on time. It seems kind of elementary, but I can tell you there's a whole lot of meetings. Everybody knows full well it's not going to start on time. People are going to drift in, and we'll be chit-chatting for a while. And so we'll just kind of, I won't even try to be there on time, because then I'll be the only one in the room. So, and you set yourself up for just very inefficient, wasteful meetings. And if you go past time too, especially if it's now and then, you may really just be on this, suddenly this brainwave going and lots of great insights and excitement and enthusiasm. And you'd hate to kind of bring it to a close, but most of the time, it's if you just started on time and not wasted time, you'd have adequate time, and you could stop on time. And then a fifth thing is just focus on issues. So when you meet, you need to identify first, okay, what is it? What's the problem? What's the issue? What is it we need to address? Let's address it. Let's not talk around it, about it. Let's get right to it. Here's the issue we're facing. Now let's pick it apart. Let's figure out a solution, and then assign people tasks. Don't just talk about it. I've been in a lot of church meetings where we talked things to death, and then the meeting was over and we all went away. No one is assigned to do anything about it.
Yeah.
We know we're going to just talk about it again a month later. There's a lot of churches that are in decline right now, and they really need to talk about how do we turn this thing around and quit losing members and shrinking. And every month they complain about the fact that there's less and less people coming, but they never get to any solutions. They never address it.
Yeah, or you solutions are provided but never followed up on, I think, because no one is given that responsibility at the conclusion of the meeting, like, okay, you're going to do X, you're going to do Y, and next meeting we'll see how that's going.
And have deadlines. Say, okay, when we meet next month, we're going to ask you to tell us how, who you met with, what information you found out about our possibilities, what you're taking steps toward doing. Mm-hmm. Keep things measurable. So what are they going to report on? What progress are we expecting? How many phone calls are we expecting them to have made? And then, as we said, hold people accountable. So let them know that they will be put up, and if they haven't done anything, done their job, it's going to be very obvious who dropped the ball. And so, be sure, a sixth thing is just be sure to follow up. Don't have a big, long meeting and then the next meeting act as if that never happened, just where we moved on to other things now. You don't have to tediously read through all the minutes, but just pull from those last meeting minutes, whatever it was that was decided, who was accountable, what they were going to do, and then rapid fire. All right, Bill, you were in charge of finding this information out and investigating this. What have you found out? What do we need to know? In a nutshell, tell us what we need to know. And a seventh thing is just report on success. When you meet, and hey, George's going to call the town office and find out if it's okay for us to do this, or can we use this facility or meet here. And then don't wait a whole month to report back. He called the next day. He got right on it. Now we already have that information. So send out a follow-up. Hey, just a quick follow-up. We did find out, yes, that is available. We can meet then. We can do that. And so we need to be thinking about next steps then. And so that builds momentum. If you go month by month, you never talk about something for a month at a time, then you kind of lose any sense of momentum, excitement. If people get on the job and they do their job quickly, send updates. That's a great thing about emails and other forms of communication. You can get on that right away. An eighth thing is just expect attendance, expect participation. If you are needed in that meeting, expect that people are going to be there. It's going to be a priority. And of course, the flip side of that is just make sure that you make the meetings worth attending. If we're going to expect you to be there, let's make it worth being there and make people want to be a part of that because they feel like they're addressing real issues. They're contributing to making this organization better. They're solving problems. And a ninth thing we kind of mentioned before, but just meet as needed. Maybe you don't need to meet 12 months out of the year. Maybe during the summer, we're on vacation, things are cruising along. We're not really addressing a problem this month. Just same old, everything's going firing on all cylinders, keep going. And let's just not meet next month. I tell you what, I've never seen people really disappointed about taking a month off and saying, You know what, right now we've kind of addressed a number of issues. We've really clean things up. We've got a great process at the moment, and so let's keep going. And,
well, I think that's a good place to take a pause, and we'll be right back after the break. If you've ever wondered how to ask the right questions to move people onto God's agenda, then consider attending the Spiritual Leadership Coaching Workshop May 2nd through 4th in the Atlanta area. Not only is there great teaching at this workshop, but you will also be able to practice what you learn. Use code EARLYBIRD at checkout for a special discount. To find out more and to register, visit blackabycoaching.org/workshop. Links will be in the show notes. Well, Richard, as we wrap up here, what's maybe the last point here you'd like to make about if you're
you trying to wrap this meeting up here, Sam?
Yeah, well, I just don't want to waste the people's time here, or mine. But for those who are in charge of having to make a meeting, if you have to call a meeting, what's maybe the last thing that people should know?
I think the last thing is just, even if it's a regular meeting, maybe once a month, once a week, meeting that you have on a regular basis. Change it up. Don't keep people guessing. You don't have to maybe totally overhaul your meetings every solitary time, but just keep people a little bit on the edge of their seats and do something a little different. You might bring in some guest person, a consultant person, maybe by video or maybe in person. You just, hey, we brought in a special guest this time. I've had people do that with me before, where they maybe were studying through maybe a leadership book that I wrote with my dad, and then they heard I was going to be in the area, and they brought me in kind of a surprise guest to a board meeting or something, and that was just a little surprise. Maybe bring some food in or some drink in. Maybe you're not doing that all the time, but hey, you know what? You guys have been faithfully meeting all year long. I thought I'd order this kind of food in, or bring a special treat, or maybe it's an object lesson. Maybe it's just some graphic object that reminds you of what it's all about. Maybe it's, if you're in a church, maybe you bring someone in to share just a very dramatic testimony of a life change, and you realize, you know what, that's why we keep trying to make this process better, because it equates into more changed lives. And so there's lots of ways to change things up. But if your meeting is just mindlessly always the same, just very formulaic, read the minutes, all those in favor, and you just kind of work your way through, and it's just tedious and monotonous, and people are half checked out already, then it's just time to do something different. Maybe meet in a different place. Go down and meet at a coffee shop one time, or go up to a retreat center and spend half a day, or just do it just an outright team building experience one day. But keep people kind of guessing, where it's fun to serve and attend meetings that you lead. Change it all around. Start from the back instead of the front, or just do something that's totally unconventional, and people will always remember that, and they'll come expecting and just being prepared for surprises, and whatever you can do to make meetings not just boring and tedious, I think you're doing a favor to all the people that are involved.
For sure. And speaking of the people that are involved, this has all been in service of those who have to plan a meeting. And this has been, I think, very helpful. And it's a good reminder for anyone who has to put a meeting together. Like, these are some great tips to know, should this just be an email or not? And if it has to be a meeting, what's the best way, most effective way to do that? But I imagine that we're all invited to meetings, and we all have to attend meetings from time to time that we are not in charge of, and that we maybe don't have a say in how that goes, or we're not the one calling the shots necessarily, but we've been requested to be at this meeting. What are maybe some ways that, if this meeting that you've been called to be a part of is just, it should be an email, or it doesn't really meet the criteria that we've laid out in today's podcast? What are maybe some ways to maybe not undermine the person calling that meeting, but how can someone who's just attending the meeting maybe help infuse it with some of this.
You're, and there's, I mean, you don't want to just be defiant. You don't want to be just rebellious.
And you don't want to be rude. And
but I think sometimes it certainly doesn't hurt to question a meeting. I've done that many, many times where I just say, can I ask what the point is? Like, what's the purpose of this meeting? Oh, I just thought it'd be good to meet. And, can I ask why? What would be good about it's me putting down the work that I'm doing during the day and coming to this meeting, or what's the gain here? Well, I just thought it'd be good. Well, why? Why? Push people. I mean, I think a leader should be able to tell you. They should look you in the eye and say, well, the reason we need to meet is for this reason. And and sometimes, like, I literally just dodged a meeting this week because
look at you.
I just spent an entire day in a meeting a week or so ago, and then one of the follow-up folks involved messaged me and said, "Hey, I'd just like to kind of schedule a Zoom meeting so we can talk through this issue in light of the meeting we just had." And the fact is, in the meeting that we had all day, we dealt with the issue. We identified what needed to be done. And so I just pushed back and said, well, we decided in the last meeting what to do. Now we need to do it. What would be helpful is if you actually kind of piece together what we met about last week and talked about, and then you show us that. Then we have something to discuss. But why would we discuss what we discuss? Like that's just more discussing, and that's disgusting. So when I push back, it's like, well, no, we did decide what to do. Next steps is to do it, and then we can talk about that. But some folks, it's just like, well, let's meet to process having met, and I said, well, that's what we were trying to do when we met. And so, and I think I think that's okay to sort of push to say, I just want to, hey, I'm going to be a part of this meeting. I just want to know how I should be prepared and what the goal is. And so I could be focused on that. And, sometimes I think by just kind of gently raising some of those issues, you sort of remind the leader about that. And it never hurts to let them know that you're busy. You're going to have to stop what you're doing to come to this meeting. So you just want to make it certainly as profitable as possible. And I would also say if you do feel like, okay, well, I've got to be at this meeting, don't sit there with your arms crossed and, be a sourpuss about it. Like, try to contribute what you can. As the old 60s adage goes, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And so participate as best you can. I have seen some folks that they can't allow a moment of silence to go by. They feel like someone should be talking. And so I've seen some meetings that could have ended 30 minutes earlier. People, we're done. We've finished meeting. We've dealt with the issue. But any last comments? And then people just want to keep talking. It's like,
now that you mention it,
and we're not really addressing anything. We're chatting, and I mean, there's been times where I've even just excused myself and said, okay, if we're all done, I've got a call I need to make, so I'm going to excuse myself, and that can kind of send a message sometimes. Hey, I'm here if it's profitable, if we're addressing stuff. If the meeting's over, we're just killing time now because there's still 10 minutes left in the hour. I can use those 10 minutes to make a call or two and answer some emails, so I'm going to slip on out. But so I think sometimes you want to be insubordinate, but or just defiant. But I don't think it hurts sometimes to just kind of very respectfully sort of ask the one in charge, now, help me know what we're trying to achieve here. I mean, I just want to be a team player here. I want to know what we're here for. If you just need my warm body in the room, and that's really all you're looking for, then let me to know that, and then I'll bring solitaire with me. I can play on my phone while I'm putting in my time. But if you want me to help address an issue, then let me know what that issue is, and I can perhaps be doing my homework ahead of time, and
Perfect.
I can do whatever. So anyway, this is an ongoing thing. I think sometimes people don't meet enough. They don't get people engaged. They don't spread out the problem so that other people can contribute to it. And then most likely, a lot of times people just meet more than they should. And it's not even that they're meeting more than they should. It's just that they're wasting valuable time in discussions and activities that are not profitable, they're not fruitful. And so don't get locked in to just doing things the way they've always been done.
Yeah.
Be creative, be focused, be purposeful. And if you're tackling problems, most people don't mind if they're in an organization, if they are truly making their organization better and they're addressing things that everybody's concerned about. But if they're just putting in time, they're just filling a seat, I just think it's just one of the worst things you can do is to waste people's time. And so just make sure whatever you call people to do, it's not a waste of time.
Well, it's a great reminder, and thanks for taking us through some of these great tips on making more profitable meetings. And here's to wishing all of our listeners very productive and efficient meetings when they have to meet.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If this is something you enjoyed, it really makes a difference if you leave a review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. We always love hearing from our listeners, so email us at podcast@blackaby.org.